Tonight, we're going to be asking questions that have been submitted to us and that we've had come up a lot in conversation just regarding, what to expect from work in the psychology and counselling space and what life might look and feel like after you've finished your degree and been registered. I thought we might kick off by just, all meeting you, Mary, and learning a little bit about your journey towards sort of being a registered psychologist, opening up your own practice and doing all of the amazing work that you've been doing.
That might take the whole chat, but I'll try to keep it really simple. I've been a psychologist for 10 years now. I did the 4+2 registration, and it was a really bumpy journey for me initially because I didn't always know that I wanted to study psychology. And initially my parents wanted me, ever since I was probably 2 years old, or maybe even before I was born, always thought that I was going to be a doctor. That was going to be my life. And throughout my whole life, that's what I thought I was going to be until year 12, when I freaked out and decided that that's definitely not what I wanted to do, and freaked my parents and my family out completely. So I kind of panicked and moved to Sydney and thought I need to start my life afresh and discover who I was outside of what my family wanted from me, because they were quite conservative and had these expectations that if I wasn't going to be a doctor, my mom was saying, well, maybe you should be a lawyer or a pharmacist. And that's pretty I guess from my cultural background, quite typical for what parents tend to want us to do. And so I moved over to Sydney from Perth and went to UNSW, and I had a little bit of space to actually just decide what I wanted to do for myself. And luckily, I had taken some psychology subjects in my first year, and I really loved it. There was hundreds and hundreds of people in first year psych, and that group got progressively smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until honours. And luckily it just really resonated with me, and I found myself being, like probably many of you, that person that all your friends come to, that will always want to come over and have a cup of tea. You're the person that's on their speed dial when they're going through a breakup or something's going on in their lives. And I think that natural affinity towards wanting to help and support others is something that we all share. And it was something that really resonated with me right from the beginning. So, we can talk about what my studies were like, but I did do the 4+2 and kind of came out and worked for Oasis, which is a organization for a part of the Salvation Army that works with street kids. And that was an incredible part of my career, because that really, really gave me so much inspiration for the Indigo Project. It was super challenging work, and I think it is important in our career to work in different sectors to sometimes get an idea of which one really resonates with us. And lots of people were coming in and out of Salvos and didn't really feel like it was for them. But when you do, personally for me, doing community work is feeling really in touch with everyday lives. And I saw myself in the lives of street kids. They essentially, I felt, were just like anyone else. Anyone could end up in their position. They had complex issues, but at the same time, they just wanted to be seen, and they wanted to learn how to trust again. And they had all the same issues that I had growing up as well. Challenges with managing my emotions. I didn't know how to deal with my emotions growing up in my family, which were never really expressed a lot of emotion and were also quite strict and conservative. And then I guess I also had, lots of trouble understanding relationships. And obviously that was mirrored when I would be in sessions with them. And I didn't really understand my mind. So when I worked with street kids and they were said, okay, well, you can have a room and you can start to see street kids one-on-one, it actually didn't work initially, because what I needed to do was really get with them and spend time with them outside of the therapy room. So I started creating workshops and bringing my friends who were creatives from all different backgrounds. They were singers and graffiti artists, hip hop dancers, DJs, and we just hold workshops for young people. And that's when we discovered that we could build trust and relationships through just connecting over things that we love. It didn't have to be a super clinical environment to begin with. It could be something where initially sometimes it's just difficult for people to be able to feel like they can be vulnerable to you. But if you're sharing something amazing, I mean, sometimes you're with your friend and you're going for a walk, and the next thing you know, they're bawling their eyes out and telling you about something that happened. And you know, it's these incidental experiences that really taught me that I didn't have to be a psychologist in the room. I could just be human and recognize that we are all human on this journey, and it's really difficult. And I think that really bonded us, where I was able to recognize that I had issues with drugs and alcohol growing up. You know, I didn't really know who I was and my identity. I really struggled with communicating with my parents. All the things that I think we didn't learn at school was reflected right in front of me as I was working with street kids. And I thought, there has to be a different way in which we can engage young people into mental health services without making them feel like they don't belong, or that they have to have a diagnosis or a disorder to come and see a therapist. And I guess when I was looking for services, because I thought it was important for me to have therapy and to experience what therapy was like, to know what it was like to be on the other side, I did find it initially difficult 10 years ago to find a service that really resonated with me, that actually said, spoke my language, and whose website that I felt engaged with and felt like that was something that appealed to me, and just really kind of took away some of the language that made it feel really unapproachable, and that allowed a therapist to actually shine through as a human being. So starting Indigo Project was, you know, an experience of lots of trial and error. But essentially, it was a service that I wanted to speak to me and my friends, a lot of them who were people in the creative industry. And I thought it was really important that we think about, how do we engage people in a way that truly helps people to understand that vulnerability is okay, and that we're all on this extremely messy journey of life, and encourages people to see therapy as something as important as seeing a dentist, exercising regularly, all the stuff that we know that is good for us, but we may feel disconnected with it. So, I mean, I can talk a lot more about what I've been doing in the last year, but maybe Ash, do you have any questions about some of the things that I've been chatting about?
Yeah, well, I think what might be sort of interesting and relevant to maybe many of us watching here is, you know, you sort of run the Indigo Project. It's a place where there's, you know, a range of sort of clinical psychologists, registered psychologists. You've got senior psychs and more junior psychs. You've got psychotherapists and counsellors. Many people here are sort of on different journeys in regards to maybe getting their psychology degree or maybe getting their counselling diplomas. Do you see any great difference between the way that these type of therapists kind of show up and operate? Like, how do you kind of feel like these manifest in different ways in the therapy room?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question, because I get asked that question quite a lot by people who reach out via email or Instagram, and just want to ask them questions about which career pathway to go through. Given that I've probably interviewed hundreds of psychologists and therapists from all different modalities, I think I have a good sense of the differences, but at the same time, the one thing that has really kind of struck out to me is, regardless of the type of pathway that you choose, the importance of life experience and going on some type of therapeutic journey yourself, whether it is seeing a therapist, testing it out, going and even seeing different types of therapists. I saw a clinical psychologist when I first started to explore my therapeutic journey. And now my therapist is a somatic psychotherapist who is in a huge alignment with how I currently work, as well as their techniques really resonated with me. In terms of how I choose therapists for the Indigo Project, I really kind of put aside people's resumes, and I want to talk to them just as they are. And I want to hear about what inspired them to come into the industry, like what are they curious about, if they were going to hold a workshop, what workshop would they hold, if they could kind of stretch from their initial kind of view of psychology or counselling or psychotherapy, how would they stretch? Like, where would they see themselves in 5 years? And I think that question really gets people thinking about, what am I interested in? And I think it's so important that, we can look at what we really love ourselves as individuals, because we come into the room as whole human beings with our own experiences, with our own challenges in life, with our own likes and dislikes. And personally, as I had worked with street kids for those years and then discovered, I'm surrounded by musicians and artists and creatives, and I'm also one as well. And this is something that I wanted to bring into my therapy and to start to experiment when I started the Indigo Project. So not only do we have 12 rooms where we have therapists seeing clients, but unfortunately in the last year we haven't been able to have people in our centre to do any of our public programming, but it's something that we're going to be reintroducing really soon. And that meant that I could explore, how does music have an effect on the mind? How can music heal and teach us about the world and different traditions and our emotions? How can we bring people into a space to understand and to look at art on a wall, for example, and that can teach them about mindfulness? We've done all sorts of weird and wacky and wonderful things at Indigo. We've had like mindful gin tasting, we've done cocodoma making, getting people like getting their hands in the soil. We've done breakfast boogies, sound retreats, sound baths, so many weird things that we've done over the years to trial to experiment a little bit. And I think having a little bit of space in your own life to think about, well, what do I do and spend my time on the weekends? What has shaped me as a human being, and what experiences have shaped me? And it's not to say that if you've had certain experience in a certain area that you're going to be a specialist in that certain area, but by all means, I think having your own life experiences and delving into them and understanding them from a deeper layer can help you to get on board and really sit in someone else's shoes and understand what it feels like to be them. And so over the years, I've actually put aside people's resumes. And the reason why I've hired people from all different types of therapeutic backgrounds is because there are incredible practitioners from every single background. And whatever path that you're on at the moment, if it's resonating and sitting with and singing to you in some way, try and stick with it. And, if you have some, further questions, be sure to reach out or ask questions in the chat about how we can, separate and define these for you. I guess the advantage in some ways of going down a career where you're in the psychology kind of degree, or get your honors or your masters or 4+2 is obviously Medicare rebates are something that people are looking for a lot when they contact the Indigo Project. But my hope is that giving the highlight and space and hiring practitioners who are psychotherapists and counselors and from different modalities will help to educate people about how fantastic all these different pathways are. You know, I could never say registration pathway is better than a clinical pathway, is better than a psychotherapist or counseling pathway, because the number of therapists that I've met who I've just connected with and that I know will work amazingly with our clients is the strongest determinant for me for bringing someone into our fold.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that also, you know, you calling out to your experience as, you know, someone on the other side of the couch in therapy is quite interesting. I'd like to invite anyone who, you know, might feel comfortable, if, you know, any of you have had your own therapeutic experiences, maybe these experiences inspired you to go and study. I know that I didn't go to get my degree until I had lived experience sort of sitting in a room with a therapist and sort of experiencing how all that plays out. I think that, you know, I've also mentioned to you, Mary, before that when I was in my honours year, I was told by, you know, one of my professors that, you know, therapy is only for people who have, you know, severe clinical mental health diagnoses. And the more that we sort of, I guess, definitely are existing in the space of Indigo, but more and more outside of Indigo, there are just lots of people who might not be at the level of a clinical diagnosis, but just need some more tools and strategies to help support them on their journey of life, because, you know, sometimes life is tough.
Absolutely. If you think about it, sometimes we don't always have that best friend in our lives that we can reach out and talk to and to learn how to be vulnerable and to open up. And I've found that in times in my life when perhaps I started to realize that I was outgrowing some friendship circles and I wasn't in alignment with them anymore. And that was really a painful process for me, like moving from Perth to Sydney at 17, I felt very alone. And I didn't really have a lot of people that I could actually reach out and talk to. And I think a lot of people that come and see me, I've seen a lot of people I've seen a lot of students throughout my years who are, you know, readjusting to this whole new area and stage of their lives and going through transitions. There are people who come into Indigo who are deciding what career they want to go into. I've worked with a lot of young entrepreneurs who want some help on how to start their careers and working through the anxiety that they have and the insecurity that they have around putting themselves out in the world. Now, you know, this might not be the same for every single clinic and practice that's out there. But there are a lot of people that come to Indigo that just share that kind of little part of themselves, that sort of inner child part of themselves that says like, you know, I'm not good enough. But, you know, I do want better for myself and I'm committed to my journey of wellness. And I'm committed to kind of putting in and doing what I need to do to learn how to feel my feelings and understand what my needs are, what my values and priorities are, and then, you know, create a vision for my life. And if you think, you know, if I think about my career, initially, I always thought that therapy was always going to be, you know, really short term therapy. And for some clients it is, but what I'm noticing more and more is as I educate my clients and my community give us feedback about their journey of therapy, is that more often than not, they're kind of taking a long-term view of their therapeutic journey. And they are initially might be coming in and doing a bit more intensive work over 6 to 10 weeks or a little bit longer, whatever is kind of they're working through initially. And then once things start to lighten and resolve a little bit, they're doing a little bit more deepening work, but they're kind of extending that period of time between sessions. So I've had clients that have moved to monthly sessions or sessions every 6 weeks because they just want to check in. They want to see how that's going. And so much stuff happens in a week, a month, 6 weeks. Like if you think about what's happened for you emotionally over the last week, let alone the last year for all of us, so much is going on all the time. And I think as we process things and not let it get heavier and heavier and heavier, that kind of sense of baggage that we might be holding, it's this kind of nice sort of sense of release that we can kind of have. And knowing that there's a person that knows that history of yours who can sort of call you out on things as well. Like I said, I've been seeing my therapist for probably 8, 9, 10 years now. And I trust him to call me out on stuff that I can't see within myself as well. So he is not a passive person on my journey. He is someone who is interested, he's curious. And if I don't see him for a while, sometimes he's like, I thought you didn't care about me anymore. And I think that's, he's really honest of him, that he recognizes that this is a relationship. This is something where he's interested in my journey, not just because I'm showing up and I'm paying a fee or anything. He's genuinely interested in my journey and cares so deeply that it could, he can be honest about what it feels like when I haven't seen him for 2 or 3 months and I've just dropped this huge bombshell and then just ghosted for like months. Like nobody likes that. I've had plenty of clients where I'm like, what happened to that person? Like, are they okay? Are they all right now? What are they doing in their lives now? And as you come into this career, you're going to have that same sense too. You're kind of building these relationships with people and they come and they go. And then you're like, I thought we had something. Or, you're like, what happened there? But, then sometimes they pop back up out of nowhere when they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like shit just got really crazy. And here I am again, so sorry. And people are back on the journey and that's totally fine too.
I think we've got some great questions that almost kind of like link onto that. So a lot of people joining us today may be already practicing, I guess, in some ways, starting to dip their toe into sort of one-on-one therapeutic work. And if you're, still in your honours year or undergrad, this is all, lined up for you pretty soon. But we've got Molly asking, how do you make sure that you're not taking on a client's heavy issues as your own? And are there any tips for remaining objective? I know that this is something that I've been confronted with lately in my own therapeutic work.
Yeah, I think it's a really important question because burnout is a serious issue in our industry. And it's something that I've done many times, from compassion fatigue, from trying to run my own practice, having staff, trying to be there for everyone, trying to be, superwoman and like putting other people's needs before mine. So that's why I think it is important for us to have our own journeys where someone can say to us, are you sure this is something that, are you aware of your emotional energy reserves as you are moving through working with clients? And I think everyone has a different number of clients that they can actually work with on a week-to-week basis, or even from a day. So clients practitioners at the Indigo Project, they work with, some of them work with 4 to 6 clients a day, typically. Sometimes they work with 4 clients in a row, and that's sometimes we've got some mums or dads that work with us that kind of fits in for them. They get in the morning or they get in the evening, and that's what they can do and that's what works for them. Most people tend to work 3 sessions and have a break for an hour or 2, and then they have another 3 sessions. So finding out what really works for you is really important. But as you know, your energy levels change from week to week to week to week as well. You have to remember, which I didn't consider when I first started in my as a therapist, that I'm going to have crap happen in my life too. And that's going to affect my ability to be super present with therapists, with my clients as well. So that means that I had to consider, in the last few years, how do I deal with grief in my life? So my father passed away a couple of years ago, and that really showed me how much I wasn't able to, navigate that space of grief if I was holding so much space for others and I wasn't allowing enough space for self-care. I hadn't really considered myself in that journey. At times I was expanded Indigo 5 years ago. We moved to this huge space. There was lots of attention. There was lots of courses, lots of everything. And I sort of lost myself in that. And so I'll be really mindful about setting up your self-care routine. Really, it's like a non-negotiable thing. Like I see an acupuncturist every week. I have an integrative doctor. Like I swim as much as I can. When I can get to Bronte in the morning and have like, even if I'm there for like half an hour or an hour, I'm in, I cleanse myself and I come back out. And that can be really difficult to set up when you really like care about someone, or you're setting up your own practice and you think, I've just got to do all these things. But I think the amount of time that I had to take to recover from my burnout really made a lot of sense to me, that, you know, finding spaces to put that in over time was really important. And second of all, sorry, it's going to move, there's a lot of sun on my face. Second of all, I think when it comes to not taking on people's stuff, we need to be really capable, or we need to know that we're not there to fix people, that you must be able to be uncomfortable with someone else's pain and to let them be in that space as well. And the reason why I say that, and I can go a little bit more into it, is when we hold space for people, sometimes when we come into this career, we get really anxious and we want to fix people and we want to make everything better for them. And sometimes we need to notice if we do that with our friends or our partners or with our family, where we try to just make it better and make people feel better. And what we do in that space is sometimes we don't allow people to really be where they need to be. When people are processing difficult things, they need to be able to feel what they're going through. And if you feel uncomfortable with that, that's why it is important that you have been able to sit and feel some of your own challenges and your own difficulties and pain, and be comfortable with that, knowing that you can come out of that when it's time for you to come out of that, not when someone tells you that it's time to come out of it. But that processing of difficult emotions and allowing people to go through that, I think allows you to not take stuff on as much as you would. Sometimes it's a little bit impossible when you feel deeply connected to a client. You might feel tired or drained or exhausted after a day of sessions. Sometimes those days are just unavoidable because you're more open and you're dealing with super complex clients. You're human too. That's the thing. It's like there's no hard and fast rules about your ability to be able to shut that off, because you're human, you feel as well, you're compassionate. And then there's times when you're going to have compassion fatigue because you're giving and caring so much. But if you have the ability to be able to sit in your own emotions and know that something that you're hearing is starting to move things in you too, and that's okay. And then you're just realizing, okay, I'm really feeling this person. How can I just like be here and let that person be as they are without trying to fix it or necessarily change it or try to put a band-aid on it or try to make that feeling for them go away because I'm not comfortable with the emotions myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the inner work is an important step in our journey. I think that we're not really called to do during our studies because we're not really prompted to, question what feelings are coming up for us, and feelings are going to come up for everyone here when they're sitting across from a client, because people go through challenges and it's you're holding that space for them. You're going to be called to, guide them or teach them techniques, or even just be there to be present and listen, and it's going to affect everyone. So I think that learning and that journey is really important. I think that I've got a question here from Jessie, which is very interesting. And I think that with so many people on our meeting today, there's going to be people all down the spectrum of, I guess, like support work, people who are very sort of on the scientific end, which is kind of where I exist, then all the way kind of down to more sort of new agey wellness therapies. And I guess many of us live somewhere in between. So Jessie has asked, how do you face the stigma and discrimination from within the psychology field? I feel like a lot of psychologists are very adamant about psychology being scientific and evidence-based, and would say that alternative complementary therapies are unscientific. How do you face these haters?
Well, I guess what we're doing, even though we have our branding and our communication to our community and our clients as something that is approachable and down to earth and we're human, it doesn't mean that we're not scientifically based or that we're not using evidence-based approaches in our work. We still use we still use modalities that are respected, and it's not like we're in there and we're waving around I don't know, crystals to heal people necessarily. Like this is an area where, there's a place for healers, and there's place for things like kinesiology and body work, and and we can work in tandem with alternative therapies like acupuncture and body work. But at the same time, we are still psychologists. We're still psychotherapists and counselors, and we're still bound by our professional ethics. So I think sometimes that people might view Indigo as something that's a little bit alternative, but at the same time, I think everyone within the organization, especially if they're psychologists and clinical psychologists, still have to adhere to all the professional development that we need to do. That still needs to get signed off every year. We have to do lots and lots of hours of that. We'd have to do peer supervision, and we do individual supervision. So we're still on that learning journey all the time. And there may be therapists at Indigo that use different types of therapies. Like we had therapists that were using EMDR. They were using lots of somatic therapies. And I think that is still within the realm of evidence-based approaches. We would use also ACT therapy, mindfulness, and I think there's just space for you as a therapist yourself to just kind of have in your own toolbox what really resonates with you. So if you go on your own journey and you discover, wow, I did a 10-day silent mindfulness retreat, I did a mindfulness course, I did ACT therapy, or you've tried different therapists that do different approaches like somatic approaches, and if that really resonates and speaks to you, you know that you can use those therapies with your clients and really speak from a place of true understanding and experience. Because where it might get problematic is even if you're using evidence-based approaches and it doesn't make any sense to you, and your client's like, well, I'm doing this thing and it doesn't make sense, and you're like, oh, what does the book say? What does the theory say? Like, humans are endlessly complex, and sometimes certain types of therapies do not work with people, even if they are evidence-based. Some people completely freak out and reject if you drop CBT at Indigo. They're just like, whoa, I've done that before. And there's always an element where sometimes you're like, you're doing it anyway, but you're teaching them about their thoughts and their feelings and their behaviors, and sometimes it's just certain words that get people really like, oh, I don't want to do that. Even mindfulness for people, they're like, oh no, I don't want to do that, like I've tried that before, like I can't be alone with my thoughts. And sometimes we have to introduce them in more creative ways to see if it's something that could resonate with them despite their initial reaction to it, because we all come with different cultural backgrounds and experiences where, Ash, I think you were saying, you grew up and your mom was into mindfulness and meditation and all these things, and you're just like, hell no, I'm not going down that pathway. And I've kind of seen you over the years do this kind of 360 and come back and, bought me a tarot card deck, a few months ago.
Too true. And I think I've also realized in my starting journey, working with people one-on-one, that people might want and need different things at different times. And so the broader that you can make your experience and your knowledge and your awareness, I think just like the more tools you'll have to bring to the table. And you don't need to be an expert on everything. It's just, I guess, a willing to learn. And obviously with sort of the professional development requirements that we have to fulfill, every year to keep our registrations going, we always have to be learning. We always have to be expanding our knowledge base. And that's one thing that I do really like about the industry and the people who work in it, because the people who especially work at Indigo are always wanting to work out, you know, more things that will make them be a better therapist, that will help them, I guess, even be a better parent, a better friend, a better partner, you know, little strategies to help them show up to life and work in sort of more adaptive and positive ways. We've got some really awesome questions. Hopefully we can get to all of them. I think we've got about 20 minutes left. Emily Wu has asked, what are your thoughts on the state of mental health in the healthcare system right now? What is good and what gaps exist? Where do you think our mental health care system needs to address the growing mental health crisis that we're witnessing sort of post-COVID?
At Indigo, what we found over the past year, pre-COVID, we were already quite busy. So I started off as a sole practitioner, and then I had a couple of psychologists work with me, and we shared a room. 5 years ago, we moved into the current space that we're in, and we started with 3 rooms. And over the last 4 years, we've moved into having 12 rooms. Over the last, we were already quite busy pre-COVID. And then when COVID hit, we got, firstly, initially, everyone got really freaked out and cancelled all their appointments. And that was super devastating for us, but we understood because nobody knew what was happening. We were all plunged into the same uncertainty and not knowing. And then we had to change our services over to Zoom or Skype straight away in one night. We had to change our business model straight away. And that was so challenging for the business. We can still feel the effects of having to pivot so quickly as we're set up for face-to-face. We're not set up for Zoom. And initially we thought this is a great way to test whether we would want to do Zoom indefinitely and forever. But ultimately for a business our size, it was really challenging for us because everything that's typically done face-to-face and in a practice, booking future appointments, taking payment, doing Medicare rebates, asking questions, every single question and touch point became an email, and we had to call people for payments. And when you have quite a volume of people, it's very difficult to deal with that. Especially even if you're working as a sole practitioner, admin is a real thing. And that was something that I had to do myself a lot. And I found that quite challenging, that not only was I spending a lot of time with clients and preparing for sessions, but then the admin was something that I didn't really learn, you know, how to set up a business, how to be an entrepreneur within the degree itself. And I think that was a really tough challenge and something that I'm really passionate about talking to people about. So if we want to do some future sessions on that journey of that entrepreneurship and that dark side of it, you know, there's a lot to it where you're trying to, you know, be the best that you can, but at the same time, nobody's teaching you about how to do a BAS and how to submit your tax and, you know, different technologies that you use for your calendar, setting up, you know, payments and all these sorts of things. There's quite a lot of complexity sometimes to setting up and running your own practice that I had to just kind of learn as we go. And what we found as therapists, you know, over the last year was that we got really slammed with new inquiries. So because we all went through something together, I think it gave people permission to look at their mental health, because there was a lot of news in the media and a lot of talk about how the pandemic was affecting people's feelings and sense of loneliness, their sense of like uncertainty. And in my chats with therapists at the Indigo Project, we can quite strongly say that it was like this illusion of control that we had over our lives was kind of taken away from us. And all the busyness and all the busying that we do, where we have plans and meetings and this and holidays and stuff, is also sort of distracting us from this sense of like not knowing what the hell we were doing with our lives. And when things in life came to a bit of a pause and slowed down, everyone's was feeling this kind of anxiety of, what do I do? What's happening? And this was something that I think really we were masking, quite a lot of us were masking by keeping busy. And so I think people are really more open about coming and seeing therapists at this period because everyone's talking about it. Medicare is allowing up to 20 sessions that are rebatable now. I think over the last 10 years, we've really shifted how people view therapy and therapists as well by showing up at, in the media and talking about the stuff that we're doing and having a bit more of a creative approach. So I think there's so much scope for all of you that are in the industry currently or coming into the industry. There's a lot of work at the moment. Like we had a wait list and then we closed our books recently because we had so many inquiries that our administrative team couldn't handle them. And we had a wait list over 3 weeks and it blew up to about 450 people over 3 weeks. And that's a lot of people that are looking for help at the moment. And it's something that we kind of provide all that space for them because we only have a certain number of practitioners and a certain number of rooms, and we're hitting a little bit of that ceiling. And we don't want to get any bigger either. The bigger an organization is, the less contact that you have with everybody in the organization. And I've learned a lot over the last 12 months too. Like I guess what I really want to focus on at the moment is sustainability. What does sustainability mean for how I work and how I live? And when I asked myself that question, initially, when you have a lot of demand, you want to try to meet it because there's been times in my career where I remember my first client, coming on board and I had my calendar and it was the whole week in one page and it was just like one person's name. And a few weeks later, then another person would turn up and another person would turn up. And over the last 8 years, that challenge of having no clients and trying to build a brand and build a client base all the way to like almost having too many clients. And what does that mean? And do you have to meet the demand that's there? And does that somehow change the quality of the service that you can give? And so I've kind of been on that full spectrum and I'm really starting to understand like what is possible in terms of organizational size, how many clients we see, how many practitioners we take on, how many staff that we need. And so I'm kind of bringing it back into the middle and saying, I think this is what I'm comfortable with. I love like working in a family type of environment where everyone is around a table and we can talk about things that are coming up. And so solutions get found really quickly. There's a sense of like connection between all the stuff. That's really important to me. And I've discovered that that's like, a value of mine that I had felt a little bit disconnected from over the pandemic because we weren't running groups and courses anymore. And a lot of, everyone was working from home for so long. When we started coming back, I started to realize like, this is the type of organization I want. I just don't want to be making decisions for the whole company and just running a company. The connection working as a therapist and within the organization is really important. And that's why a lot of people do come and work for us because they, working in a solo practice was a little bit lonely for me. Now we can kind of chat with different therapists about different modalities. We swap books, we swap, places that we can do professional development. We talk about different theories. There's someone that you can kind of check in with at points and get a bit of advice. And, that's not for everyone, but especially, for young therapists, I think it is important that you have a bit of a community around you or a sense of, at least other people in your industry that you can meet with regularly. And I have a group of practice founders that I meet with every month, and they're from all different parts of the country, and we catch up and we talk about what it's like to be owners and what our values are at the moment, how they're shifting, how we're feeling about things. And it's been literally like the best thing for me as a therapist and a business owner.
I'd just like to say thank you to everyone, who's still around here in the chat today and everyone contributing some amazing questions. Thank you so much for also sharing your own sort of views on things and experiences and sort of maybe what you're getting out of this already. there are a couple of people sort of asking in a few different ways. You know, some people who are thinking that they might not go on to do a master's or even an honours, so post the sort of bachelor. People who are also asking just how they might go about learning a bit more about what they want to be doing. They understand that they want it to be in the mental health space. Maybe they want to start exploring different things that will help, you know, support them during their sort of registration journey and expand as a practitioner. Are there any sort of tips of guidance that you might be able to offer?
Yeah, I think that sometimes the challenging thing, especially for psychology students, is that our degree is very long. Like, I don't think I really understood that the whole shebang was going to be 6 years, whether I was going to do, a 4+2 or continue a master's pathway. And I think that's why you kind of see lots of people starting, and then like it kind of trickles down in honors and in masters, and it gets super competitive and it's really, really challenging. And I think that's a difficult thing about our degree, is that in the first 3 years or even the first 4 years, you're not really in contact with many clients at all. And so you never really get the chance to understand, is this what I want to do? Am I going to be good at this? If you're thinking about one-on-one therapy, it can favor potentially people who are more book smart in a way, like who are, just able to take in the information and kind of regurgitate that in exams. And that I've kind of noticed that sometimes that, when I'm meeting new therapists and I look at their resumes and they come from all different types of universities, it actually doesn't matter which type of university that they've come from, and their experiences are so varied. It just matters like how they kind of present in a room and the experiences that they've had. So a lot of people have reached out to me because we've taken on a lot of honors and third year students, second year students over the years to actually work at Indigo. So a lot of people in our reception team and administrative team who've started their journey, but may have kind of come out at third year going, what the hell was that? Or even fourth year and just gone, I need a bit of a break. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And I've spoken to a lot of kind of people in that situation, and they get experience with us because they work with us and they understand, well, what is it actually like if I'm doing administration in this capacity? Because I'm talking to clients, I'm picking up the phone, I'm doing a triage, or I'm doing an assessment, I'm getting to hear some of their story. How's that sitting with me? That seems to give people a lot of insight into the organization. So getting experience in any type of way, whether it's like even working at doctor surgeries, working in places that take on clients and their stories, and you get to hear their stories and you get to work with them in some capacity. I started my career also working initially on phones. So I was working on a gambling hotline. I know a lot of people that have started out in Lifeline who have gone to support groups as well. So there are support groups, that the men's groups, there's women's circles, there's groups that you can join. For example, when we start our groups again, and there's courses such as Get Your Shit Together or How to Create the Life That You Want, or workshops, people come into this space where you are a participant as a client in a way, and you get to understand that journey and whether it feels right for you, whether it's something that you feel like you could see yourself doing as facilitating. Because I think not everyone has to take that journey of going and seeing one-on-one clients. I know for you, Ash, like, you might be doing that at the moment to fulfill your registration, but that's not necessarily something that you want to do. And you've been testing the waters by, doing all sorts of other things within the Indigo Project, like content writing and blogging and doing research when articles are coming up. So I guess you've got also a little bit to say around like what people can do when they're not really sure whether this is a career for them or not.
Yeah, I think there's, psychology is so vast, and again, we don't really get exposed to the full scope of what careers in psychology might be able to offer us just in university. So we have to do a lot of our own legwork on it. We need to be out there reading, out there learning. There's lots of sort of free online platforms where you can, I guess, be exposed to different types of therapeutic modalities, where you can learn about different sorts of populations that you might want to work with. And it's hard to know, and you feel like, oh, what am I going to, am I going to make the right choice? I don't want to, what if I commit to doing one thing? I think that when you work in the field, you don't need to worry about that. Like, sure, you might find something that you love and be working in, neuropsych for the rest of your life, or be working as a certain type of practitioner, until you're old, and that's cool. But a lot of people like to sort of try something for a while, just like you, working with the salvos for a while. And like you mentioned, a lot of people do start their journeys working with sort of counselling and support hotlines where they get that lived experience of really sort of having to chat one-on-one with people. So there's a few different, I think Nikki's just asked, what are those online platforms? We're going to be shooting an email out tomorrow, which has just a few groups on Facebook that you can join that have a lot of different therapists and psychologists and counsellors that kind of share questions and share their experience, different tools that might come in handy for you on your journey. Something else that I think might be really beneficial to any sort of early career therapists is, I guess, the therapeutic journey, Mary, that we were discussing earlier. Maybe some of you are already undertaking your own sort of therapeutic journey, and maybe not, but I think that it's generally accepted and acknowledged that it is really helpful to be building that self-awareness. And the book that you've just recently published, Mary, has this amazing journey that kind of takes you through how to, I guess, take a deep dive into yourself and develop that self-awareness in quite a warm, compassionate way, which I think is great for us to learn that we can do for ourselves, but also so we can show up for our therapists.
Yeah, I guess the inspiration for some of the courses that I've run at Indigo, and something that might help, some of the therapists that are in this group who are thinking about, what can I do in this space, and what would it be like to take my own therapeutic journey, and what's out there, is that when I started the Indigo Project, and I was in it for probably about a couple of years, I noticed that a lot of clients were kind of talking to me about similar things. They were talking to me about like how to deal with emotions, how to deal with relationships and have tough conversations, how to set boundaries, how to become more self-aware, how to develop self-love, self-compassion, how to value themselves, how to understand what they want from their career, how to deal with painful experiences from the past, how to forgive someone, how to let go of baggage. And this was like when I started to understand and see a pattern in all these things that people wanted to talk about. I realized that there was a journey that people could go through, and it was something that you could take kind of step by step by step, not only as an individual, but something that you, as a therapist, that I could take my clients through too. So very quickly, I kind of developed a course called Get Your Shit Together, and it was a course that went over 8 weeks, had a mindfulness component all the way through to help people develop their sense of self-awareness, but then bit by bit sort of taught them skills in like how to handle stress, how stress turns up in their body, how to work with their emotions, label them, see them, process them, feel them, purge them. How can we understand what our needs are? How do we go through exercises? How do we look at our past in a way that is constructive for us, to get the wisdom out of it rather than just to stay in the challenge of it? How can we understand and identify the needs that come out of difficult circumstances, and actually forgive people that we may have had relationships with in the past but we're still holding on to? And ultimately, I noticed that there were things that were stopping people from moving forward, and it wasn't always conscious to them. So people come into therapy and they say, or sessions with us, and they say, this is where I want to get, but every time I try to get there, I kind of seem to kind of do it for a little while, and then I kind of go back to where I was. And so what I think what's really important is, like, for me, it's like, how do people access some of their unconscious drives that are driving them, that are kind of getting in the way of them moving forward? Because it seems really simple, right? Like, do this stuff, be kind to yourselves, there are all these strategies that we have, but for some reason there are so many blocks to us being able to move forward in a way that's constructive. And that often comes from situations in the past where we've been told, you're not good enough, you're not worthy, you know, you're not valued. And we need to look at those situations because, you know, I know it's uncomfortable to kind of go back into the past, but when we do go back and we can hold space for those parts of us, our inner child that was hurt, the inner critic that might have kind of came up because of that, or the saboteur that kind of gets in the way of your relationships. Like I had a part of me that would always kind of like withdraw from relationships or just get really aggressive. And it was like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to be that person, but I kept finding myself in patterns, and you realize that the patterns stem from something deeper. And so when I created Get Your Shit Together, it really kind of, you know, it really resonated with a lot of people, because it wasn't like, this is a course on anxiety and this is a course of like, if you have depression, come into this course. People from all different ages and industries came and did this course face to face with me. And it's something that we've done ever since. And it's become an online course that people do. And then it's kind of morphed into Darkness is Golden, this book where I kind of take people through a journey, and there's audio experiences and meditations and practical exercises, because I think the challenge in our industry, and sometimes the wellness industry in general, is that it often tells people what to do, but it doesn't tell people how to do it. So it tells people, okay, you need to forgive yourself. You need to forgive others. You need to love yourself. You need to develop self-worth. And you're like, how the hell do I do that? Like, that is a huge process. How do you develop self-compassion for yourself? How do you even know where the inner critic is and how to bring out that wise voice in yourself? How do you decide what your values are if for your whole life you've been told that these are the things that you should value? So separating all of that and going into the kind of darker, more unconscious parts of us that are actually kind of pulling the strings is really important, because when we do a very superficial type of transformation, or we bypass our difficulties to get towards the light or the good stuff, which is, we've got to be really aware of that as therapists. We're just trying to get people to the light straight away. Sometimes that challenge is really what people need to experience. And the research is out there. Post-traumatic growth. Wow. You know, we learn about post-traumatic stress disorder, but who's learned about post-traumatic growth? And the research that's behind that, that says more often than not, people are going to have a positive experience despite some really difficult things that have happened to them. And we're talking wars and floods and HIV and cancer and bereavement and grief. And you think, gosh, I would not survive that at all. But the research is there. The research is saying that when people go through these journeys consciously and do their best to sit with the difficult emotions that may arise, and how their belief system has been completely shattered, and take that journey to kind of lay a new foundation for themselves. Those new foundations is similar to what we've been through in the last year with the pandemic and COVID. We're thinking about what is meaningful to us now. Relationships are more important. We don't want to work as much for us, you know, we don't want to be stressed out. We want to be with our friends. We want to be with our families. We want to, you know, enjoy nature more. People's priorities actually change if their belief system actually gets so torn apart that they're like, where do I even begin? And that, when everything falls apart, it's really scary. Like, I've been there a lot of times in the last few years. I've just kind of been doing exactly the same journey as I was writing the book. But that process of putting, you know, just being in the unknown, or being in the void, as I call it, where nothing makes sense and you question everything, completely scary, but so important sometimes, because that's when you start to go, gosh, I'm in so much grief and anxiety and confusion and unknowing that I actually need to figure out what now fits into my life. And I can almost start from scratch in a way. What doesn't align with me anymore? What friendships are just no longer making me feel good about myself? Do I even really like my job? Like, am I coming home from work and like excited to tell people about it? Or am I just like completely drained every single day? And I think we put up with a lot of crap in our lives, and our clients also, for those that are seeing clients or those that are about to see clients, you realize you see patterns in people that you're like, you are so amazing, but you're in this pattern and are you seeing? And they're like, yep, I'm seeing it. What's holding that back? And it's really untangling that and kind of getting to those core beliefs that actually just need to be shattered again, so that people can replace those beliefs with, I'm worthy, I do like myself, I can trust people again, the world is a safe place for me to be in, I am competent, I can find a job that aligns with me, I can find friends that really resonate with me. And that journey takes time. So I wrote Darkness is Golden, and I thought it was going to be like, get your shit together. But part of it was that my father passed away when I started writing the book. And then I had a complete breakdown while I was writing the book, because I was so overwhelmed and trying to be the best and be an amazing writer. And I've never written a bloody book before, so I didn't know what I was doing. And it was so confusing and hard. And I was putting so much pressure on myself that I actually just combusted. And it was the most difficult thing, because I didn't want that to happen, because I was like, I should know better. I'm a therapist. I have all the tools. I should have my shit together. And it was so humbling and so embarrassing for me, and so much shame and so much for me. But I kind of went through the same journey as I was hoping that the readers would go through. And so as I'm writing this thing, I was still experiencing all the challenges of that journey that people would be on. It's like insecurity. It's like, who am I? Like, who am I to think that I could actually write this book and be good at it? And I think whether we've had like huge traumas in our life, or woundings, or situations where people have rejected us or isolated us, and we're still carrying that. I work with a lot of clients who still hold bullying from years ago. There's situations where it's just like, my best friend like kind of ghosted me in high school or something, or there was a breakup in my life that, even though the relationship was only for 3 months, I'm still carrying that. They don't have to be these huge traumas they can be really simple things that come up in therapy that people will say, wow, I actually recognize that I'm still holding on to that thing that person said to me when I was 8 years old, or that test that I failed when I was 10. It was so interesting what people end up kind of coming down to when they feel safe in that relationship with you, so that slowly things can emerge from the subconscious, because you're feeling safe and held and connected. So, if anyone is thinking about taking that little journey for themselves, and then maybe something that they can use while they're in therapy with someone else as a journey, I think that might be helpful. Because I remember sitting with my first client and just going, what am I going to say to this person? And then what happens next? And I just had notes and notes and notes. Like I was like, had all these notes, and I was like, okay, make sure you say this and make sure you say that. And then the next week I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? And the week after and the week after. And what really helped me was that when I started to learn different modalities, such as mindfulness integrated CBT and ACT, and they had a little pathway where it was like, these are the meditations that you might be doing with them on this week, and these are the things that you might be exploring, and in this week we'll kind of do this. And by all means, like, you're creative people, and you will come up with your own ways of delivering information that resonates with you and that makes sense to you, because you'll be using your mixed bag of goodies. But sometimes initially, when you're kind of in the industry, you're just like, I don't really know what is the beginning and the middle of the end of the journey, and different parts that I could take people through. And that could be a grounding to you.
So Amy has said, you spoke about us as therapists entering the therapy room as humans and just being approachable. I start my internship next week and have imposter syndrome creeping in. Any tips to manage this?
Well, I have to say, because I hire therapists from all different backgrounds and all different ages. So we've got the junior therapists all the way to senior therapists who've been working with people for 10, 20 years. It is the most common thing that a therapist says to me as we do supervision. And we do this in groups and everyone talks about it. And as soon as someone will always say imposter syndrome. So I want to really normalize that and say that pretty much every single therapist that I've come into contact with has the same thing. So it doesn't matter if you're really new or you're like been doing it for years, you're just like, what the hell, like, I don't even know what I'm doing. And I think some of that humility and that humbleness is really important, because when you have that, you know, the good part of the imposter syndrome is that I guess it's a part of us that, you know, also, you know, you don't want to do the wrong thing, and you want to try to do the best job ever. And there's a part of you that's like, I'm not doing it right, I'm not doing it right. And that kind of motivates us to be like, okay, I can do my research, and I'm like gonna like show up and like do the best that I can. When it gets a little bit overboard is when it becomes crippling for us, and it stops us from moving forward and stops us from putting ourselves forward. So also a lot of therapists that have worked with me who have kind of transitioned into some of the group-based work that we do and the workshop, they're always like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't know if people are going to like me and want to talk to me, and whether people are going to laugh at my jokes or not. And I think it's completely normal, first of all, but we need to, you know, go back and have a little chat, I think, to that part of ourselves and understand where that part of ourselves actually comes from. Is it, you know, did it come from someone that said that, you know, you're not really good at this thing, you know, at some time in our past? And I think healing that is really important, and not beating ourselves with a stick because we have imposter syndrome or anxiety or some insecurities, because when we try to beat ourselves out of behaviors, it kind of just gets worse, and then we kind of negatively impact our relationship with ourselves. So you need to remember, like, think of a friend who's like, or think of another therapist in this chat at the moment who's like come up to you, and we've paired you all up, and they've said, I have imposter syndrome. Like, what are you going to say to them? You're going to say like, get your shit together, like pull your boots up, like, you know, get over it, you know, like manage it somehow? Or you're going to say like, oh my gosh, I totally get you, I completely feel you. What does it feel like in your body when you have imposter syndrome? Like, where does it lie in your body? You know, how does that feel for you? If imposter syndrome was a feeling, like, what would it actually say? And it might say, I'm feeling really lonely, I'm feeling really scared. And it's important that we listen to that and actually hold space for those voices inside of us, because they're not necessarily going to go away. But what we can do is to bring a sense of that wise person within us. So, you know, if imposter us exists, also that wise self also exists within us. You know, that part of you that we've spoken about, Ash, that says, okay, you've had too many drinks, it's time to go home now, it's time to go to bed, get off your iPhone, stop scrolling internet. That wise self is there. Sometimes we don't listen to it, but we can strengthen that voice of wisdom when it comes up and we recognize, well, those feelings are really familiar to me, and I know where it comes from now, and I know I can have compassion for myself, and it's not necessarily going to stop me from stepping into this fear. That's why I was saying earlier how it's so important that we can sit in discomfort, and that we don't allow discomfort to necessarily stop us from moving forward in our lives, that we can do things and feel completely scared. Like, I still get up in groups and I still run workshops and stuff where I'm actually trembling before I begin. There's interviews that I've done in the last few months where I'm just like I can feel what it feels like to have that part of me going, what are you doing? You have no idea. Like, you're gonna like trip over your words and make a fool of yourself, and like, you know, who are you to be an expert? And I think that part of us and going, okay, it's there. I'm going to do some deep breathing. I've got to ground. I've got to sometimes say it, just be like, I'm feeling really anxious right now. I'm feeling really insecure. And just sometimes just like naming it and calling it and making friends with it in some way, because the more that we shame that part of ourselves, I think that's when we start to lose connection with ourselves, because we're just not loving ourselves. If we were to say to a friend, like, as we said earlier, like, get your shit together, like, you need to do better, like, you need to improve yourself. I think that you can see how relationships change if you start to be really judgmental and hard on yourself, because there's that part of yourself that feels like an imposter. Just know that it's bound to show up, and it's also just showing up because it's just a part of you that needs attention and love and can bring in that wisdom as well at the same time.
Yeah, I think we've also kind of chatted that it's also an indication of your empathy and your desire to show up like well at work and do best by your clients and the people that you're working with. So, you know, it's really unpleasant and shit, like you've been there, I've been there, you guys have probably been there, or you might, you know, end up there when you're sort of starting to see clients and in therapy. And I don't think that, you know, sometimes like we learn our feelings aren't always real and true. And just because we feel like a fraud or feel like an imposter, it doesn't mean that we're not doing a good job and being there and present for our clients in the best way that we can. So we've got Danny's question, which is right up your alley, Mary. How do you see psychedelic therapy playing out in the future, and where and how can we get involved with this movement legally?
Well, I really hope that it's a part of psychology and the mental health industry that will just start to get bigger and bigger and more popular, given that if we follow the footsteps of the research studies and the movement that's happening in the US, where there are different states that are decriminalizing, and you know, there's so much money that's being pumped into these therapies at the moment for research over in the States. Like I know MAPS is an organization that has probably raised, I think in recent times, like, you know, $10 million towards research pretty quickly. And these are donors, you know, private donors from all around the world that are really hoping that, you know, it can get through all the checks and balances that it needs to. At the moment in Australia, the latest that's happening is that the TGA is looking at submissions, or had been looking at submissions to change the scheduling of psychedelics. So from a prohibited substance to a controlled substance. And that means that doctors and psychiatrists can prescribe these substances given that they're going to be in, you know, controlled environments. I know that in Victoria, so if any Victorians are here in the room at the moment, I know that there are ways that if you have a treating practitioner who is open to the use of psychedelics in therapy, that you can actually, they can actually apply for what's called an SSAB. I think that's what it's called, some type of form that they can kind of submit. And at the moment, it's something that in Victoria, you know, there are not as many gateways, and it's actually available at the moment, given for treatment resistant conditions, where they're basically, what that means is that, you know, the client, the person themselves has tried a variety of things that seem to have not worked. So that's very exciting, and that I think a lot of people don't know about that. Someone's talked about Mind Medicine Charity. I also work with them as well, and last year went through an interview process to do their certification, which I was accepted in, and I'll be starting that in May this year. For those that are already in the industry, they're a really great resource, because what they've been able to do recently is they're getting a lot of really great speakers on their webinars. So they've had Gabor Mate recently. If you guys don't know who he is, look him up. He's incredible in the field of addictions, and he's just, oh my gosh, when you hear him speak, he's amazing. They've got Dr. David Carhart, I think, speaking soon. All different people from around the world who are industry leaders in this area are speaking. And I know that they have a conference at the end of the year, I think in November. So if you're interested, like, definitely jump on that and check it out. I'll probably be heading there too, so please come and say hi. I think there's so much potential in this area in the industry. Unfortunately, at the moment, a lot of it's run underground, because although the medicines are not available in a lot of different states, people are still doing psychedelics underground, and also going to therapists to talk about them. So Mind Medicine, and I think also a couple of therapists at Indigo that I know through supervision, are seeing clients who have had psychedelic journeys and want to integrate their journeys as well. I know that Mind Medicine has a team of therapists that also work with people who have had psychedelic journeys, and they also help people integrate. So regardless, you know, people, you know, those who are interested in psychedelics and doing it legally, I know that there are a modality called breath work, and this is a similar type of experience to experiencing psychedelics. It's part of the course that I'll be going through. There's a weekend of breath work, and it's it's a non-drug induced state where people can actually feel what it might feel like to go into a psychedelic journey. Completely safe, but also something that where, you know, there's no drugs involved at all. I know also people have likened Listen Up, which is like a music experience that we hold at Indigo, which we held, you know, over the last 4 years, and we'll be starting up again soon, where basically people just lie in the dark listening to music, and I'm guiding people through the music. People also have psychedelic out-of-body experiences in that journey as well, because they are feeling safe and connected to their bodies, and they're able to go in and process different types of pain and whatever they're kind of sitting within their bodies, and also feel really amazing and light and inspired. What we did research with Listen Up over the last couple of years, and what we found is that like about 70% of the participants that were in these Listen Up journeys were also having visual journeys, things that they've never seen before. They were floating in space, they were up in the sky, they were seeing really beautiful scenes of nature, movies that, you know, kind of, it's kind of like VR without a headset in a way. And, you know, some of that research that we're looking at is like, how powerful is it, you know, that these non-drug states can actually help people to not only process pain, but how creative the mind is when it's just allowed a bit of space. And I think that's what's really interesting in this area, is that we have so much capacity to heal ourselves, that we have this innate ability to, you know, towards like wanting to understand ourselves better, or self-actualization in some way. And when we allow ourselves space, instead of maybe always being, you know, we're just fed a lot of information about how to feel, what to do, what's important, what's successful. And I think that can cloud our perception of like this information and wisdom that is actually already kind of within us. And I think when we turn down the noise a little bit, we can actually turn up that voice of wisdom, and we can truly understand what we need. And I think that's what sometimes what psychedelics actually does. It kind of brings us back into that state of curiosity, that state where we can be in our bodies and feel again, and that state where, you know, we can get a sense of what it feels to truly feel like self-love and gratitude. When sometimes for people who are going through these therapies, from the research is that it's been a long time since they've been able to see the light and feel the light, and to feel compassion and to feel gratitude. And, you know, these therapies, as well as, it's not just psychedelics in terms of psilocybin, but MDMA and also ketamine and ayahuasca are parts of this these medicines that are being studied really rigorously right now, going through all different types of research studies, which allows us to understand not only the effect of these medicines, but also the effect of the environment, the setting, how people are showing up, and also the effect of music as well in these settings, because we know in traditional cultures, like, music has been medicine, and music has been parts of rites of passage for so many different ancient cultures. And I think once we, you know, there's so much wisdom that we may be missing because we haven't really been in contact with ancient traditions, and we're a little bit far removed from that, especially if we live in the city.
Mary, I'd love to sort of ask you if there were any books, if there were any experiences that you've had whilst being a therapist, whilst running a psychology practice, that have really, I guess, supported you and expanded your knowledge and awareness.
Johan Hari's book, what's it called?
Lost Connections.
Lost Connections. Really great. I know a lot of therapists, The Body Keeps the Score is something that a lot of therapists are reading, because somatic therapy is becoming much more recognized and into, I guess, the mainstream, rather than kind of off on the side a little bit. Parts therapy, parts work, internal family systems, obviously different types of somatic therapies. Internal family systems is kind of like a framework for how do we work with those parts within us, speak to them, guide them, you know, make friends with them in a way. It's that feeling that we've got this little family within us.
There's a nice introduction to that as well in your book, which I really liked, because some of the writing on internal family systems can be quite heavy and complex, but I think that you did a really nice job of breaking it down and making it sort of something that can be understood.
Yeah. You know, these days I have to read a lot of fiction because I can't read too much research because I've just been like cluttered in my head full of like having to learn. I think it's just really important that we like don't take this too seriously sometimes and actually get out there and live.
Yeah.
And like kind of get in contact with intuition, because sometimes people say, you know, what do I need to learn and what do I need to do? And sometimes the best thing that you can do is like learn how to play. You know, go and get creative and like go and see what the inner critic has to say to you when you decide to do like a paint and sip class or something like that. You know, like get into relationships and like talk to your friends about your feelings, like open up that space of vulnerability and see what that's like, and see what it's like to hold space within your friendships and deepen them. Like take risks in your relationships that are trusted and safe, because I think, you know, living that experience is so much actually better than and immersing yourself in just pure theory. Like get out there and like make mistakes and try new things and explore the fears that you have, like step into them, like do stuff that you're afraid of, explore, explore what scares you sometimes, because I think that's where we really learn what it's like to be in our bodies and grow and transform and what resonates with us. So I think play is really bloody important. And I think finding a way towards your inner intuition and your inner compass is probably one of the most important things I have to say as being a therapist. For me was that I used to do lots of preparation, lots of like writing notes. And after a while, I think, you know, initially that was really important because it helped ground me and helped me to feel safe. But afterwards, what I would need to do is feel grounded walking into a session, in session, and be there, be present, like listen. Because if you're thinking about, I've got to get through this, I've got to do this, I've got to say this, I've got to blah, 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 you're not actually being present. You know, you think about all the relationships that we have where people are just waiting to like get in there and say something. You're like, you didn't even really hear what I was saying at all. And I think that listening is super important, that ability to be really present, where sometimes I feel like when I'm in sessions, like sometimes the knowledge is coming from where it needs to come from. And it's not from always the thinking mind, it's from something else that maybe if you're a creative or an artist, or, you know, you do sing or paint or draw, sometimes there's these flow states that you get into that I found through years of my career stopped the burnout, helped me to feel like happy and refreshed and fulfilled, and my cup was filled seeing clients, because I knew that I could just turn up, be myself. I didn't have to have all the answers, I didn't need to be perfect. I could just rock up and be myself and let, you know, trust that the relationship was going to be something that was the most important thing in the success of that session. Was that even if I thought people were like, oh, I don't really know if I, you know, you think, I don't know if anyone got anything out of that. And sometimes you just need to say, is this okay? Like, I feel like maybe we're not getting anywhere. How does this feel for you? And that honesty and that vulnerability from you sometimes is the thing that can break into new areas and really deepen your relationship with your client. So, you know, have the balance of learning and then have the balance of just like being in life and discovering what it is about you that is amazing, and feel proud of like what you've achieved and where you're at, whether you're at the beginning of the journey, you haven't even started yet, or you're like 5 or 10 or 20 years into it. Like just having that time to reflect and just say, I'm doing the best that I can. And I think it's pretty amazing, is something that people can see when you're walking into the therapy room, like how you carry yourself and that inner strength that you have. This is something that goes beyond words and beyond techniques and tools. It's like, you know, when you sit with someone and you're like, oh, okay, I feel really held. And I feel like we don't even need to speak. Like with your best friend, you're like, I don't even need to speak. And we can hang out and I feel comfortable and safe because I know that you feel comfortable and safe within yourself. I think that's the most important thing.